Hey guys, welcome to Maganimation, Make Animation Great Again, Episode 6. Now, I know we've been on a long hiatus since the Samurai Jack series finale. That was the fifth episode of this podcast. I guess it's a podcast, really. And we kind of lost inspiration. Me and Sharkfoot, needless to say, we didn't get it across in the original review. I'd say we were both a little disappointed in the Samurai Jack finale.
We were just too afraid to admit it.
Yeah, I was in denial.
I was too. I'm sure a lot of us were, but
But we're back now, and we talked about it, and we said, why did we even start Maganimation? What was the whole point at the beginning? And the idea was we wanted animation to basically have a higher standard. We feel like a lot of TV shows on Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, a lot of animated films now, not only are they not interesting as stories or with their characters, even the animation feels lacking and less creative. So we realized this show was all built around the idea of making animation great again and going back to the past to point out what we're talking about. The masterpieces throughout animation's history and just art and what animation can be and why it's an art form that is separate from film or just literature. There's something about the artist who draws their own work telling their story through the artwork that is important to both of us.
like Miyazaki drawing about 70% of his animations to Studio Ghibli.
Yeah. Or a lot, or the comic I'm reading now, Berserk, the manga, most of it. So today we're going to be talking about René Laloux, the French director's 1973 masterpiece, and I have no problem calling it a masterpiece, Fantastic Planet.
Or La Planète Sauvage, if
Yeah.
you're French.
La Planète Sauvage,
Obviously,
yes.
it's from France.
Yes, and if you don't know a lot about French animation, they actually have a very underground scene there that's very popular, be it their comic books or even their animation department. The recent film The Red Turtle, released by Ghibli, was done by a French filmmaker. I'm a big fan of their style, and I was talking to Sharkfoot like a week ago. He was over at my house, and we were talking about Akira and Fantasia, and we were just talking about animation that's really epic and thematically rich, and sci-fi and animation and adult films told through animation. And I brought up Fantastic Planet. I was like, you ever seen that? You know, and then we watched it, and it hit me while we were doing it, like, this is what the show is all about. This is manga. This is amazing. And we've basically been spending a week talking about it, and it inspired us enough to come back and do this episode.
Yep.
But I guess we could just jump right in and do the review for it. And if you haven't seen it, it's very easy to find online. You can
Just a quick Google search here and there.
Yeah.
It don't bother paying for it. You can find it. There's an English dub, and honestly, there's not too much dialogue, so subtitles wouldn't bother you either.
There's also a Criterion release that was released on Blu-ray, I think, a year or two ago, and that's how I first saw the film, was through a friend. And I fell in love with it right away. But you've seen it, what, 3 times now?
Oh, roughly like 2.5 times. I had to take a shit one time and I never got back to it, but
And you've been listening to the soundtrack?
nonstop. Its soundtrack is a nice blend of psychedelia with jazz by Elaine. I think it's Elaine. I'm gonna try here, guys. Goragor? Is that?
It seems like Elaine Goragor. Yeah,
Whatever.
Goragor. It's
French.
foreign names. We're sorry. Yeah, we're gonna have a.
But a very great soundtrack with a common thematic throughout it, and it carries through the movie itself, and it complements every attribute to the movie.
Well, it's funny because when we were listening to the soundtrack, I leaned
yeah.
over to you and I was like, "Man, this reminds me of Adam Heartmother by Pink Floyd." And then we were looking up stuff for this movie, and that comparison was everywhere.
Yeah, it's pretty much the common opinion.
Yeah, which it means I'm not.
Of course, the French love Pink Floyd.
Yeah, I'm a normie. I pointed out the most obvious comparison you could make. If you don't know what Fantastic Planet's about, very interesting movie from the beginning, right away. There's a woman running with her baby, her little baby boy, and the art style looks like a painting come to life, or the panel of a comic. You know when you look at a comic book and there's one panel, the shot that gives you everything? That's how this movie is. Just one shot of the animation. It may not even have much movement, but it says everything that needs to be said. It's a great example of when less is more in simplicity, not only in your storytelling and themes, simplicity with your animation to reinforce your themes. It makes this movie feel richer that it isn't complex.
And it also starts off with a simple woman just with her child running from what they're afraid of, and then it eventually moves on to the next scene, which is children playing with the mother and the child, and then you start to get a whole new perspective, and it shows that really what they're up against. And then at the first thought, you think they're humans until they announce later on that they're ohms.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You start the movie and you see this woman and her baby, and you're like, oh, this is a human, and they keep getting knocked down by this giant blue hand, and you're like, what? And the perspective's kind of screwing with you, and then it gets bigger, and you realize, oh, they're getting messed with by this alien, and she gets dropped and killed, and this is the first like minute of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
No big spoilers. And then the baby gets taken in by a little girl
Named Tiva.
Tiva. What are they? What are they? Drogs?
They're the Drog Prime Minister. He says in the beginning, the dialogue. That was the first time I met the Drog Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Little did he know that he binded our fates together or whatever.
Yeah, our fates would be binded together, and he wouldn't realize it then. The Drogs are an alien race that is gigantic.
Mm-hmm. They're like 15 stories tall.
They look very alien. They have some human elements, like there's breasts and, abs, and their faces are human-like, but very alien. Some of the most foreign alien designs I've ever seen in a sci-fi film. Like, I would compare to the xenomorph in Geiger's work, where it's such a non-human design. There's some human elements that it's so off-putting that it's fascinating.
True surrealism. Like when they go to sleep, their eyes go gray, or when they die, their eyes go gray, and they can also change their bodies into different shapes.
There's a part where there's a bunch of drogs sitting there. They all meditate.
Very classic scene, yeah.
And there's like 4 of them, and they basically take apart all their molecules and cells.
I call it the molestation scene because they're really just getting rubbed down by a bunch of tentacles. But I think it's like I don't even know because they get visions from it.
Yeah.
And so it's still weird.
They basically get high off their own mind. They're like basically Buddhists. They're Buddhists who can somehow click into DMT while they're meditating. Mm-hmm. This movie is surreal as all hell. Like this movie's weird. Like, we're only talking about it in the simplistic terms. This little boy human gets raised by a drog girl, and he's tiny. Like, he fits in the palm of her hand. That's how small it is. And this screws with you as a human being. It really messes with your perspective, because the way the movie's framed is the shot's focusing on the drogs, and the human seems small in scale.
They never stop showing that.
Yeah, that idea. So you clearly start to get, while you watch this movie, as this main character starts to get kind of raised up in the society.
Like, what gets creepier about it is how human-like the drog are in their behavior, and
yes.
what they do, and how they talk about the ohms and how they want to deal with them.
They talk about them like pets.
Yeah,
they have them on collars, and they go, put a leash on that ohm.
Yeah, there's one scene later on where they actually try to make them into a pit fight,
like crabs on a beach or something.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, but it's no different than how we treat animals today. So I could definitely see the animals' rights point.
Well, that's what we're about to get into. We'll get on that a little bit. Yeah, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but when you start to watch a movie, it's basically a classic adventure story where this human who's raised in the society starts to use their knowledge and their technology as a way to uprise with the primitive people to go after them, and it becomes basically like a revolution story.
In a way, yeah, or like, just a quest for survival to me, really.
Yeah.
It doesn't come off more like they're really not trying to change anything. They're just trying to get away from these things.
Yeah. But the means of doing so falls under a bit of a revolutionary.
It leads up to the point of civil war.
Yeah.
On this planet called Yam. It doesn't take place on Fantastic Planet.
Yeah, which would be a spoiler. We won't reveal, but there is a fantastic planet, which is kind of the secret of the movie.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, you're not saying... No, we haven't really... I mean, honestly, and there's not a lot to spoil. The movie's very straightforward. The only place you don't see where it's going, I'd say, is like the third act. That's the point where you're like, whoa.
Yeah, it gets really crazy.
Yeah, but when you're watching the movie, which was made in a very strange time. It was made in the early 70s when...
The distant land of 1973.
Well, it's weird because at this point, animation to most people would have been traditional Disney, and this is made by a French director. It was independently produced. He made 2 other films after this. This is considered part of a trilogy. I haven't seen those 2 films, but this film, when I first saw it, which I've heard about for years, this is a very acclaimed film. It's been a cult film for a long time. What immediately grabs you about it, and this is something that he was hinting at a little bit ago, we don't want to go into it totally, is when you're watching the film, the longer you get into it, you start to realize what it's actually saying thematically as a piece of science fiction with very little dialogue. The dialogue here is only for exposition or to narrate.
Just to
world build.
Yeah, it's just really... everything that they say in there is a description of the drog or the ohms, really, or the planet.
And the main character's narrating from a baby to an adult man. I didn't realize in 70 minutes you get a whole lifespan of this character because they age faster on this planet.
Due to the height difference.
Yeah, and he narrates, and his narration is... It's not like that narration where it's cheap. It's like, wow, that's a really important piece of information. and it kind of makes it where you don't. And it's funny, the animation speaks for the emotional substance.
Yep.
Just seeing the character's face when they're sad, or this moment where they walk through this place where they whistle to crack these like diamonds.
Yeah.
That says more than anything would in like 10-minute dialogue sequences.
It's the practice of basically showing rather than telling.
Yes.
It's just showing Tiva through an average day of their lives, and you're just watching him as he grows up. There's just a normal day in a life, and they fuck with them. That's what they do. They can spawn little thunder clouds and things like that.
No, they can. It seems like the drugs can do almost anything. Like the movie doesn't even show you the full potential of them.
The world's become their plaything in a way.
They're at a point where they have like their own god and religion, and they're on this abstract plane at a plane of existence where they just meditate and their minds go off. And there's a little bit of a reveal with that, but like I said, I won't go into that. But the idea of Fantastic Planet is you start to realize the human beings are a metaphor for animals or creatures that are below us, because they treat them like insects. At one point they try to exterminate them, very much like insects, and then they treat them like dogs. And the movie's trying to tell you that, okay, here's why this is a brilliant piece of sci-fi. By making the drogs so foreign looking and such a science fiction concept, so alien to us, we can't possibly fathom them as really being human, and they show them being so beyond the realms of humanity. So you have to look at, you relate to the Ohms, obviously, because they're humans. But then as you start to watch the movie and you realize how greater and more intelligent and how much they act like humans, the drugs, you realize the commentary is the movie is making you see what other creatures in life suffers through, as man is the top of the evolutionary chain. And you see it through the eyes of science fiction, because he doesn't make you relate to the drugs at all. He just makes you see this very objectively, like a Stanley Kubrick or a great filmmaker. So you have to watch this, and eventually you don't see the humans as humans, and them not being called human is so important to calling them ohms.
Yes.
That takes away the humanity and the ego that you have as a person.
You have no attachment to these beings, but yet you still have sympathy for them.
Yes.
They look like you, and just how it really touches on a whole psychological level.
Apes.
How you judge everyone by looks.
And that's what's crazy about this. Like, it's like, oh, what if fish evolved and eventually got really powerful and smart? What could they do if we got to that point? And are we really guilty of genocide for years because of arrogance? And the other theme is an evolution of technology and a reliance of being an introvert.
Because most on this planet that they're on, it's a big dystopian planet. It's a big desert, to be honest.
It looks like a crap hole, honestly.
I want to live there.
With creatures that are horrifying.
But most of the time you see them just in buildings, talking and looking at screens and stuff like that, and it's a very common state. It's really ahead of its time, because it's how the world's falling apart around us, and yet we're sitting in there in front of television screens acting like the world's okay.
Well, it's like webcam conversations.
Exactly.
And stuff.
Like what we're doing now in a weird way.
Yeah. No, it's what they do. They communicate via like iPhone and digital messaging.
Except with their minds.
Yeah, they do it with their minds. But it's like humanity's mind is the technology.
Mm-hmm.
Because if humanity could get to the point where technology is so advanced, it would be like evolving to another plane of mental existence or somewhat.
Mm-hmm. Or believing you are.
Yeah.
That's the arrogance.
Yeah. And the movie's main theme is, it's actually, I think, a lot of anti-violence, anti-war, well, it's a message. It's a progressive message without shoving it down your throat, because this was a different time.
It's not preachy.
And it's influenced very much by like acid and the drug culture.
It could even just be was it Rene Laloux?
Rene Laloux.
Yeah. It could have just been his psychedelic trip that he had on acid one day, and he just wrote this down. He's like, "Hey, what if humans were pests?" And
basically, the idea is just basically let's make humans pests, or pets,
and that's where the root of it all comes from.
And some people we were trying to look it up. Some people are trying to make slavery connections.
Yeah, and the racism connections I don't see in it. I disagree with it, but
yeah, I don't know. Maybe I just don't see the racism, because to me it's way bigger than that. It's a human thing. It's not about saying someone is a different skin color. It's like a whole different species almost. And the thing is, they take away the humanity and your feeling as a human, which a lot of sci-fi is scared to do. That's why a lot of us like Alien, because the xenomorph's so disgusting and gross and then sexual, so when it kills you, it's more horrifying. And that's how this movie is. Like, the drogs are scary because they are human-like, but they still are detached from us. Mm-hmm. And it makes you understand the fear that creatures that maybe don't understand human beings have.
It doesn't pull you into one character or another. It really pulls you into looking at every side of everything. It gives you a really unbiased perspective as you watch the movie.
Well, the little girl's a good person.
Yeah.
but
She's just a little girl.
and some of the drogs aren't bad. They say things, but other ones don't know any better. And it's how we treat, like, hey, you have a bunch of mouses, you got to go kill them.
Literally, the humans are the size of like baby mice.
Yeah,
at biggest, and like they try to stamp them out because they are just pests to them.
yeah, and they're causing trouble. They're causing, they've been it's established throughout the movie rather well that there's been these uprisings happening.
And every time there's like an action conflict, there's always a psychedelic score. It's like wow, wow.
Yeah, no, you can't go a minute in this movie without like
freaking Jimi Hendrix or Pink Floyd just jumping up on the
I know.
It sounds great.
It really does. The score.
The movie itself and the score is just timeless. It's just like an ethereal entity through all eras in a way.
You're right. When you say timeless, that's a point. And that's where we talk about the Fantasia and Akira comparison. This film feels like it could be a classic film from the 30s, 40s, or it could be made today. Its themes about technology or the evolutionary state of man is something you could look at better today than even in the 70s.
Yeah.
And yet it has a universal quality about it that goes back to great literature that was being talked about philosophically before film was even a thing.
It's transcendent.
It is. It's one of the only animated films I've seen that is transcendent, though. That's the thing about Fantasia and Akira is that they take you to another place, and that transcendence is something that I think animation can do in a sense that films can't do in the same way. Films can do it, like films transcend all the time. But films are always held a lot by the physical nature of its actors and its world and its cameras and its screenplay. Animation's not limited by pretty much anything except the director's imagination to create what he wants to.
Right.
And his ability to. And René Laloux, I don't know if I've ever seen a director get money to make such an original piece of an animation film in my life. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this, really.
From what I've seen and what I've researched in it, Roland Topor was the one who was the head of like the production design and how it looked and everything. And if you look at his art styles, it does fit in. That was mainly his handiwork. And by the way that the Draug are positioned and designed, it really goes back to a Victorian age of art and fine arts that he presented them in such an intellectual fashion with that art design, by their postures and how they look and motion to each other with their mannerisms. Whereas the Ohms, when they start off, he drew them in a very savage way like Simeon, until they start becoming intellectually evolved, and then they stand more broad-chested with glory of man.
Well, it's funny because, yeah, it's showing you the evolution of mankind, but not doing it in a direct way.
Doing it because they're forced to.
Yes, and it's also, God, I mean, I don't want to spoil it, so I won't. But like the ending, holy crap!
It's too good. It's too good to spoil.
Yeah, it ends so like kind of dark and interesting.
It's cold.
It's cold. Yeah, it's not what you're expecting.
Reality is
because they almost set up this moral theme throughout, and then at the end they throw that out the window for like, this is what happens. Like it's some beautiful little irony, I'd say, for the Draugs in a sense. Like they
pull back.
Yeah, pull back. It's I'd say so far of what we talked about so far in the show, this is probably my favorite thing. And some Ren and Stimpy I love and all that, but this is a piece of art for being 70 minutes long. It to me is something that really is what I want people to look at and say, this is what animators should be doing.
I mean, say what you want about the French, and I say a lot, but they know their art. Like,
they do.
And they really take it seriously.
Well, I've also had rumors that Jodorowsky might have worked on this, and I've heard, and you could actually tell a lot of the design does look a lot of the stuff he was working on for Dune. And I had a friend who once said, and I don't disagree with him, he said this film has maybe the best set design, art design he's ever seen. Mm-hmm. Well, art design more, because there's not really sets, but same thing. But yeah, the animated sets, the creation of the art design, the way the creatures look, like even if you did this live action, it would be at the level of the greatest works of film. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is at, when you're like watching films by Tarkovsky or Kubrick or Blade Runner, I mean, it is like, whoa. And the way he uses perspective to make the size difference, really.
Again, like going back to the beginning, it starts off small with a mother and her child,
yeah,
and then it grows, and then you see the cities, and then you see the planets.
You know, the movie does get bigger.
That's what I mean. Like,
yeah.
Then eventually, I don't want to spoil it, but the obvious happens. You know what I'm talking about once you see it. But it gets onto basically a solar perspective.
Yeah.
And you really see the grand scale of everything.
Well, that's what's crazy about this movie to me. It's 70 minutes.
It's the same thing with Akira.
It is. No, except this is 70 minutes long.
Yeah, and he does that in a short amount of time, and it's brilliant.
It's so epic. Today we were talking about the last 40-minute stretch of Akira has a lot less dialogue, and it's just this one long sequence, basically, with Tetsuo going nuts. And this movie's like that for like 70 minutes. I mean, it's like a season of a television show worth of story. Mm-hmm. And he tells it in 70 minutes.
In such a subtle and quiet way.
He uses the narration to cut corners, get exposition out of the way. He's very clever with his use of dialogue to give you just the information you need, and then the animation does all of the rest of the work. Like that's what's crazy about it. The animation literally does 98% of the work for this movie.
Another like true brilliant aspect of this movie, like there's one scene in there when the main character does end up with another savage group of Ohms, and this is when he's first getting hazed and introduced into the society there. And they have their own culture already established because they've been savage for so long, and it does it in such a simple way because it's a quick scene, and he makes them do a trial by combat. But the trial by combat's so unique because they tie their arms behind their back and attach a very like vicious insect to their chest.
It's like the worm thing from Dune, but little, or the sandworm from Beetlejuice. It's like a little creature with a big reptile like jaw mouth,
like a Pac-Man.
And they tie it to the front of you and tie your arms back, and you have to try to kill each other with it.
Essentially, yeah. Well, basically, yeah. That's it. And it's really brutal. And then that whole situation resolves itself afterwards and everything. But it's really just in that subtle, like, 2-minute, 3-minute scene, they cover the whole aspect that they have an established society, religion, and government that he has to go by this trial by combat to be established into the society.
What I like, too, is that we've established this character's more intelligent than the other Ohms. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't want to be doing something this savage, and we relate to him, so we feel tense for him in that, but his intelligence is what gets him out of these things. And their stupidity is what ends up with a lot of them suffering later.
Yes.
The people who trust him, which is also maybe a commentary about intelligence not being praised in society. They don't like that he's smart.
Yeah, very common today.
Yeah, looking down on intelligence and not making the intelligent people are leaders necessarily, who's more popular and entertaining and charismatic and strong.
Right.
Because the lead character's not really a big strong...
He's an average man.
Yeah.
But he eventually becomes, a head honcho in this situation.
Well, kind of a hero.
He's an alpha.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a total alpha. It's... That scene's really great. The train. One sequence I like is there's a scene where there's this flying creature that's like an anteater, and it's horrifying looking with these eyes.
Everything with what's this called, the anteater?
Yeah.
And everything about it is designed because it has the hollow trunk of a nose that burrows into trees, and then a tongue that has a sticky surface and pulls them all in like a chameleon. It's like, and it flies around and does this.
And you see, and these humans, they live in these like hives. They live in these big like hives, like bugs or something, and it goes in there and it just takes them and puts them all in their tongue and drags them in, and you're like, oh my god, this is savage.
It's
and once
terrifying.
again, it makes you think about what insects go through or any other creature
Never
that's
had more
smaller.
sympathy for ants. Never in my life.
Yeah. This makes you sympathy for an anthill, for taking a leak on an anthill.
But my favorite thing about this movie, I'd have to say, is that it just literally looks like a moving painting. It just looks like a painting that you could put a frame around it, and it just looks like a painting that's just come to life.
I'll add on to that. What I also like about it is that it gives you the feeling of what it's like to look at a painting.
Yeah.
When you look at a painting, it's a still image that the artist gives some meaning, but a lot of it's up to your own feelings with it.
And I think a lot of these interpretations come from that. So it's like basically painting.
It is, and that's what animation could do in a lot of ways, is that when you watch every frame of this film, you have to think about what the thematic significance is. Mm-hmm. And there's interpretations about what it's about, but what's clear is that there is something that this movie's about, that it is saying something. And it's not a director being pretentious about it or pseudo-intellectual.
You see that in the subtlety throughout the whole movie.
He's smarter than you.
Yeah,
basically, he knows what he's doing from the beginning.
Right.
Just when you think you're figuring the movie out, or you're one step ahead of him, or that it can't keep going this path, you're like, oh, it's one kind of story, it can't turn into this story, and then he nails that next story. This has the sense of discovery and awe that I only get when I've read like the original Dune novel or the first Star Wars films, where like the sense of every time they find a new creature or place, even though it may be horrifying and scary, it's the wonder of the new, something we've never seen as humans.
Like the creepy laughing plant that grabs little birds and throws them on the
Yeah,
ground.
there's just
Why is that there?
I don't.
It raises more questions than answers, and it makes you want to know more about this world. But I don't know if there was a sequel or a prequel.
And this is a precursor to like Heavy Metal magazine stuff,
Yes.
and this is around the high times there with like Fritz the Cat and Ralph Bakshi and stuff we see. But this is so much more mature than a lot of that stuff. That stuff
And
was completely like stoner exploitive. A lot of
going
it.
back to a point made earlier, it's timeless. It can stand with anything nowadays and still be its own movie.
Well, that's what blows me away about it, is that it's smart and it's fun and it's simple and it's actually a lot of funny physical comedy gags. The score's great.
Yeah. Like when the main character Tare starts choking out that one guy who starts singing. It's just one of my favorite.
Yeah,
parts
and he
of
has
the
this terrible hat he has to wear
He
for
looks
a while.
like a goofy motherfucker.
No, it's awful, and it's very dehumanizing.
It's
the movie.
humiliating.
Yeah,
and it really shows you the humiliation a lot of our pets go through too. Going back on that.
Yeah,
point.
putting your dog in a sweater
But
and they
those are
look
all-
miserable.
It's all real. It's exactly how we treat animals.
No, that's the most horrifying part of this movie. Is every time it's over, I feel like a really bad person.
Yeah, it's a bittersweet ending,
Yeah.
but it's like you
Well,
really,
hopefully, I do think it's eventually an optimistic message, though.
you see like the result of the greater good, doing something for the greater good. They had to do it.
Yeah. And if humans could work with other things, maybe we could make a better world than fighting each other and using everything for food and entertainment. Maybe there's another way.
I'm pretty sure we'll start doing that once cats start knocking on our doors with AK-47s.
Yeah, no. But there's okay, so like yeah, let's get to wrapping this up soon because we
Yeah.
went on way longer than I thought we were going to. There's just a dense amount of things to talk about
Honestly,
this film.
leave more in the comments after you see it, which I'm pretty sure you guys are gonna watch it.
Yeah, almost don't even watch this video until you see the movie. Or if we
Yeah.
if we even
I'm afraid we spoiled some stuff.
if we make it sound interesting, just please come back and comment because I'd love to talk about and hear your interpretation.
There's so much conversation pieces. But this movie was ranked 36th greatest animated movie ever by Rolling Stone, which bothers me because Rolling Stone's really weird with their rankings.
I'm guaranteeing you that they have like Pixar films for like 20.
Yeah.
And I think but I find this better than like almost every Pixar film except maybe like 2. Like there's a couple like I think Finding Nemo could be held up or The Incredibles about it, but like this movie, if you're being just pure ambition and accomplishment and for the time when it came out
And true art.
and the narrative, well, not just that, it shows you
It's a pretentious word, but it's there.
it's not only great because of those things, but that it's a great piece of storytelling. It's like here's how you can give the audience information. Like there was an idea. I can't remember what director said it. I think it might have been. It wasn't Spielberg or Stanley Kubrick, but some filmmaker that I read this quote where they said, you only need to show. It was James Cameron. He said you only need to give an audience a piece of information once, and then they get it. You don't need to keep explaining that piece of information over and over again.
Anime.
And this movie, he gives you a piece of information. That's pretty much it. You got to follow it, and then you follow the next scene, and you get the logic.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of screenwriters could learn from this because it shows you that once you have your story figured out, it's really just it's not how you tell stories.
It's how you execute it.
It's how you execute the telling of the story. Yes, because he tells the story in a very cliche, classic way. I mean, it's very first, second, third act.
It's like he kind of just lets you take the handle and just you figure it out on your own in a way. And it kind of allows you to build up with your own imagination for the story and what you think it could be.
Well, the things that you get attached to as a viewer, that's the things that you're going to focus on throughout the rest of the movie. And he gives you the ability to do that.
And then he only just reinforces it with subtle dialogue throughout the whole movie.
It's beautiful. It's heartbreaking, while it's also very oddly entertaining and funny. It's psychedelic. It's phantasmagorical. It's different. It's original. That's one thing I could say about it.
Definitely. The soundtrack is amazing.
It's visionary too, and it's one of my favorite movies, not just one of my favorite animated films. Mm-hmm. And every time I watch it, I can honestly say I probably like it more than the previous time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and there's moments of this movie where the music and the animation just happen, and they're so engrossing.
Natural. It's just such an organic
Like, I was just
experience.
looking over at you, and there's points where your like jaw was dropping and your eyes were wide because it's just there's moments where you're like, oh my god.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's these orbs floating and the music comes in, and there's a part where there's this mating ritual.
It's like the music was made for the motion of the film. It was really like how everything moved in each scene. It was made to be specifically tied to those objects moving in the scene. Like, it has this really opera choir going on.
Well, that's why I call it a masterpiece, because the animations with the story, with the characters,
enforces it.
Yeah, everything's a whole. There's not a false beat. There's not any fat on this movie.
No, that's definitely another great thing about it.
And a lot of the stuff we've talked about, like the Samurai Jack finale, is disappointing in that, and there was, Ed, Edd n Eddy doesn't have a great last couple seasons, and Ren and Stimpy, John Kay got fired.
This is shit on every episode we ever done.
well, the idea is that, with this is really something that you can just sit down and watch and understand that we want more movies like this. And I had a film book that brought up this movie, and it said it said something like, you're very unlikely to find an animated film as weird and different as this since this came out. And it's really true.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's not just the story and stuff like Akira has, because Akira has an art style you've seen before. It's just more detailed than most anime. I haven't really seen a lot of art styles like this movie.
No, maybe like to the intros of Monty Python.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. You're so right. It looks like that Terry Gilliam Monty Python opening.
Yeah, that's what I thought when I first saw the hand.
You're so right. Jesus. God, Monty Python should have done an animated film like that. Crap.
Terry Gilliam was a genius.
Yeah.
We can have a whole segment
Actually,
on that.
that's a great comparison, Terry Gilliam. If you think about his sets in Brazil and Time Bandits and Burn Munchausen, this film actually feels very Terry Gilliam and has a lot of his commentary about society. Mm-hmm. And government and bureaucrats, and there's actually politics in this and all that stuff. But it's like I said, it's not
It seems
forced.
like the movie picks up like, oh, it's just another Tuesday, and
Yeah.
then it goes on through their daily lives, and it's bizarre.
Okay, so to wrap this up, what would you have to if you had to summarize?
Shit, I hate this part.
Well, I'm just saying what I know you don't. Well, just real quick, what you never saw this before? I showed you the first time. What was your immediate impression after, and how did you feel? And what was it like? Okay, I've seen this movie now. What was it?
It was a movie to me that came full circle. It gave me the right amount of closure. I had a lot of questions, and so it made me want to watch it again, as a movie should do, a good movie. So after I watched it, my only thought was, I gotta watch that again. And then I gotta steal the soundtrack offline.
See, what's a better recommendation that when you're done with this movie, you want to watch it again? And that's exactly how I felt the first time I saw it. I wanted to start it over again and be like,
Let's watch it again.
yeah, yeah, because it blows. I want to watch it right now just talking about it. It's so exciting.
This René Laloux,
Yeah.
he also made Time Masters in 1982 and Gandahar in 1988.
I've seen parts of Time Masters now that I think about it, but I've never seen Gandahar.
Yeah. We might get to them at some point.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they're as good as this, so we'll have to go see it and check them out. But if I'm just for my personal recommendation, if you like this stuff on this channel and what I talk about, you like the previous
You're
episodes.
gonna like Fantastic Planet.
Yeah, couldn't recommend it more, honestly.
It was,
I mean,
Yeah.
and if you're worried a little bit at the beginning that's going to be slow and have bad pacing, and so, don't worry, that goes out of the way right away. The opening just is that you might get. That's what I thought
your
when I first watched.
curiosity will hinder all of that.
Yeah.
Like you'll be so like the movie piques your interest depending on who you are. I mean, not everybody will like it, I guess, but
I just think a lot of people haven't seen it.
yeah, that is an issue.
I don't even think there's people who like it. I just think once you show it to someone, then they're converted. Like, oh, dude, wow,
Yeah, Fantastic Planet, bruh.
it's literally fantastic.
It's a title worthy of that adjective.
But only nothing but praise for René Laloux, Roland Topor,
and Elaine Groger.
yeah, Groger,
And the guy who made the musical
and Dick
composition.
Elliott, who did the editing, because this film's very well edited.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Again, no fat. He's a good butcher.
Yeah, and you get all the information very quick. They hit a lot of plot points, and they give you a sense of geography and time lapses. I kept saying, like, oh, I wish Game of Thrones could do this.
Yeah,
I wish they could actually establish time
they
like this show.
explain so much with so little dialogue, and it's so rare to see in movies and animation today, where everything has to be explained to you. You have to have your hand held throughout the storyline.
Well, it's funny because I was reading the Berserk manga, and me and you all day had this long conversation about all these storytelling techniques and how we like when the artist and the storytelling become one unit, and that's what separates comic books or animation films. And when we talk about making animation great again, we're not saying that all animation now sucks, or that there's not good shows or good movies, or that Pixar doesn't make good stuff, or we didn't like Moana. When you think about why Moana was so good, it's because it had great art design. It's because it had really engaging story. It had
Three-dimensional characters.
wonderful music. That's the thing. It had movement. And the animation did reinforce the story because the set design and cultural aspects are part of that movie. The ocean's the character in the movie, literally and metaphorically. And the idea of how far it goes, no one knows. That's actually kind of a deep yet simple way to look at it, and that explains Moana's motivations in a sense. And that's all we talk about, is that so many animated films today, like Illumination with the Minions films or Secret Life of Pets, it's just to cater to little kids. And then other animated films, like the Pixar films, are just trying to cash in on the magic they once had.
Or anime in general, like Attack on Titan and things like we were talking about earlier.
Miyazaki's retired. Ghibli, Red Turtle's good, but we're not seeing a lot of original animated films coming out
It's
of the
always
woodwork.
people aspiring to be something else and not be themselves.
Which René Laloux was an original. I can't compare him to any. I can compare him to artists in different times.
Terry Gilliam's the only one because
Yeah.
And that's only Roland Topor with his art design.
That was actually a great comparison, though. You pulled that one out, and
I know, I brought it up again because I wanted you to say.
I didn't even think about Terry Gilliam compared.
You're
'cause
welcome.
if you're a fan of Terry Gilliam, I highly recommend this. Honestly, like if you like his films, be right up your alley. It was definitely deserving of its Criterion release. If you don't know this film, it won the jury prize at the Cannes Film Festival. It's been celebrated a long time, but it's still sadly underrated. It's one of the most underrated films I've seen. Most people I know.
It's a very humble film.
Yeah, it doesn't wear its achievements on its sleeve. But to say why we want animation to be great again, we just want to be inspired to where we're passionate and we want to watch the movies over and over again. And we don't want to just watch them because they're funny and they have likable characters. We want to watch them because they make us feel differently about the world we live in. And they make us feel differently even about how we interpret art and the capabilities of art. and what someone can do in that when they have an original vision and idea, and they know how to tell their themes, this being, you know, how we treat animals or how we treat things that are different from us, and tell it in a way that is also a science fiction story and an adventure story in a very traditional classic way. And by doing so, he achieves a grandeur and narrative depth that I've only really found in perhaps literature.
Yeah.
And he does it with comic books, and it shows you that animation is an art form that, you know, I think Gene Siskel once said when Beauty and the Beast came out and it was so praised, he said, or it might have been Roger Ebert, who said, you know, this film argues now that the movie musical belongs in animation because of what animation can do. Mm-hmm. Because of that sequence, Be Our Guest Tonight. I think this film might make an argument that science fiction is sadly a genre that's not tapped into enough in animation.
No.
And this thing, like Akira we talked about, sci-fi with animation, you can show that crazy stuff that films have a really hard time capturing.
But all in all, to me, a 10 out of 10. I'll be as bold to say that.
Yeah, I'd probably give it like a 9, 9.5, but it's definitely a great film.
I'm just in love with it right now.
I am too. No, I've been balls deep in this one for a while. But please watch Fantastic Planet. Please leave your opinion in the comment section. Leave us a recommendation for the next review, be it a movie or a TV show.
We promise it won't be 4 months.
Yeah, we're not taking breaks anymore. It might be over a week, but we're going to try to do this on a more regular schedule. We already have some episodes planned out.
Yeah, so please leave a comment down below, and please watch the movie. It's a great movie.
Yeah, that's the thing. We just want people to know about this stuff to
watch
support it. Yeah, support it, yeah.
Watch it.